This episode of the CyberWire is made possible in part by ExtraHop. It's becoming clear that today's attacks can't be prevented, but they can be stopped. Modern cyber attackers have already made it inside your network, but you have the upper hand. Find and eradicate threats with ExtraHop network detection and response and shut them out before real damage is done. Learn the advanced techniques attackers are using and how ExtraHop stops them with a live attack simulation. Visit extrahop.com/cyberwire. That's extrahop.com/cyberwire. A look at the Russian malware used against Ukrainian targets. Actual and potential targets harden themselves against Russian cyber attacks. Sanctions and the criminal underworld. Conti's fortunes. A credential stealer resurfaces in corporate networks. BlackCat ransomware warnings. Tomer Bar from SafeBreach discusses MuddyWaters. Our guest is Dr. Christopher Emdin with a preview of his new book, STEM, Steam, Make, Dream. And CISA releases 3 more ICS security advisories. From the CyberWire studios at Data Tribe, I'm Dave Bittner with your CyberWire summary for Friday, April 22nd, 2022. The Record has an overview of the Russian malware that's been used against Ukrainian targets. Wiper malware has been particularly prominent so far in Russia's hybrid war. Citing conversations with Ukrainian security officials, they describe Whispergate, Whisperkill, Hermetic Wiper, Isaac Wiper, Acid Rain, Caddy Wiper, 00, and Indestroyer 2. The Straits Times reports that Ukraine has worked to upgrade its defenses, for the most part through implementation of widely understood cybersecurity best practices. This week's joint cybersecurity advisory by the Five Eyes is prompting similar moves in other countries, Bloomberg reports. The energy sector is receiving particular attention, an essay in the Wall Street Journal explains. China, looking on as an observer generally sympathetic to Russia, more or less a tepid ally of convenience, on the familiar grounds that the enemy of my enemy is, well, sort of anyway, my friend, sees U.S. preparation in cyberspace as dangerous provocation. The Global Times, a Beijing mouthpiece, argues that U.S. defend-forward policy is destabilizing and contravenes international norms of conduct. The U.S. Department of Treasury has taken punitive steps against Russian organizations found to be enabling other groups' evasion of sanctions imposed in response to Russia's war against Ukraine. Of particular note is the addition of BitRiver AG, a prominent crypto mining venture, to the list of sanctioned entities. For its part, TechCrunch reports, Russia has responded to a tightening sanctions regime by designating various prominent U.S. citizens as henceforth barred from travel to Russia. Their list includes Meta's Mark Zuckerberg, LinkedIn's Ryan Roslansky, and Vice President Kamala Harris. The welcome mat will be yanked from others, the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs explained, as it develops and expands its list of Russophobes. They said, in the near future, a new announcement will follow about the next replenishment of the Russian stop list in the order of countermeasures against the hostile actions of the U.S. authorities. There's no particular evidence any of them were planning to, let alone longing to, travel to Russia, but we'll leave that aside. It's a move against leading Russophobes. Sanctions designed to inhibit the flow of money to the entities they affect have a collateral impact on the parasitic criminal economy that accompanies legitimate markets. Flashpoint describes the ways in which sanctions against Russia have made it more difficult for cyber gangs to cash out. The takedown of the Hydra market, for example, represented a direct interdiction of a traditional cash-out avenue. And not only do the sanctions themselves directly impede the gangs, but the countermeasures Russia is taking to increase central control of its economy are also having an effect. Flashpoint writes that gangland chatter suggests the criminals are looking into peer-to-peer cryptocurrency exchanges, conventional bank transfers that sanctions don't yet reach, and Chinese-run UnionPay cards. The gangs are also considering hunkering down and holding their gains in cold wallets until the heat blows over. SecureWorks looks at Gold Ulrich, a prominent operator of what the researchers characterize as Conti ransomware's name-and-shame site, and describes how it has adapted to recent revelations and setbacks. Costa Rican authorities are also blaming Conti for attacks aimed at disrupting that country's presidential transition. 6 public institutions have been affected. In short, it seems that the incursions into Conti's private chatter by Ukrainian and Ukrainian sympathizing operators has had a negligible effect on the ransomware's operations. Some observers thought that the privateers would sustain reputational damage from the leaks, but it turns out that the reputation under threat was not the kind of reputation people care about in the criminal underworld. eSentire reports a fresh infestation of More Eggs malware across various company networks. The credential stealer is being distributed in a spear phishing campaign that targets corporate hiring managers with phishbait representing itself as resumes from fictitious job applicants. More Eggs last surfaced a year ago. The U.S. FBI has issued a flash alert on BlackCat ransomware, describing the indicators of compromise associated with this strain of double extortion malware. The alert also describes the typical course of a BlackCat attack. The FBI says, BlackCat ransomware leverages previously compromised user credentials to gain initial access to the victim's system. Once the malware establishes access, it compromises Active Directory user and administrator accounts. The malware uses Windows Task Scheduler to configure malicious group policy objects to deploy ransomware. Initial deployment of the malware leverages PowerShell scripts in conjunction with Cobalt Strike and disables security features within the victim's network. BlackCat ransomware also leverages Windows administrative tools and Microsoft sysinternals tools during compromise. Bleeping Computer reports that BlackCat has affected at least 60 organizations worldwide. And finally, CISA has released 3 new industrial control system ICS advisories. And now, a word from our sponsors, KnowBe4. So, what's a con game? It's a fraud that works by getting the victim to misplace their confidence in the con artist. In the world of security, we call confidence tricks social engineering. And as our sponsors at KnowBe4 can tell you, human error is how most organizations get compromised. Where there's human contact, there can be con games. It's important to build the kind of security culture in which your employees are enabled to make smart security decisions. To do that, they need new school security awareness training. See how your security culture stacks up against KnowBe4's free phishing test. Get it at knowbe4.com/phishing test. That's knowbe4.com/phishing test. And we thank KnowBe4 for sponsoring our show. My guest today is Dr. Christopher Emdin. He's a professor of education at the University of Southern California, where he also serves as Director of Youth Engagement and Community Partnerships at the USC Race and Equity Center. He's the founder of hiphoped.com, and Dr. Emdin is author of the new book called STEM, STEAM, Make, Dream, Reimagining the Culture of Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math.
We found that those who were brilliant in science and math actually had a really strong artistic and a creative side. So, in good wisdom, I guess, or in good research, they decided to include the A in STEM. And so that's how we got from going from STEM to STEAM. Now, unfortunately, the movement from STEM to STEAM has not been successful. And unfortunately, we still have the overall dire straits when it comes to getting particular populations to be engaged in STEM disciplines. So we're now at this sort of inflection point, like this moment. We said just STEM because they weren't doing well in it. We said STEAM because we thought the arts would fix it, but it's still not working. So where are we now? And that's where I come in. How do we reimagine this idea of STEAM? How do we not say just art, but art and culture, art and ancestry, art and imagination and aesthetics? And how do we reimagine what STEM and STEAM instruction looks like in classrooms? We changed the acronyms, but we never changed the pedagogy and the teaching. And so my work, my mission, even my book, STEM, STEAM, Make Dream, is about how do we reimagine how we introduce young folks to these disciplines? How do we reimagine the arts? And how do we change the landscape of STEM education in this nation?
You know, I think people certainly recognize the reality that not every school system in the United States is created equal, and there are lots of systemic reasons for that. Does adoption of STEM sort of track along with that? Do the wealthy school systems in affluent areas, do they have the extra bandwidth, the resources to be able to focus on this, where some of the communities that are struggling don't?
Dave, I'm going to say something really provocative here, and it is that even the most affluent school districts, who we would imagine are preparing young folks to be amazing in STEM, are also struggling with getting young folks to retain in STEM, to declare science majors or engineering majors. So we do have an issue with socioeconomics, right? Young folks in urban settings are not finding opportunities or resources are inhibiting them from being able to fully engage. And there are things that we have to do around equity with the distribution of resources, yes. But I also want to make clear that even the affluent school districts who have resources, who have the wealth to be able to introduce young folks to STEM, are also struggling with getting young folks to retain success in there. So the issue here is a national issue. And I think the solution is actually the same across the board, which is that STEM instruction must focus on the particular needs of a population, the particular artistic and cultural needs of young people, and must be relayed to what's going on in their lives every day. Now, if that approach is employed everywhere, I think we get better. But here's where it gets even more interesting, is the recognition that you can't standardize that. You can standardize the approach of censoring culture and censoring youth experiences and censoring, what young people are into and meeting the needs of particular populations. But you will also have to recognize that there are different needs in different places, right? That more affluent school districts may need something completely different. And those students might have a very different culture than young folks in urban spaces. And so I think the solution to our problem is to recognize that instruction in STEM cannot be hyper-standardized. It must be localized. It must be unique to the needs of a population. And it must bend itself to where young folks are while keeping academic and intellectual expectations high. So we don't sacrifice the rigor, but we recognize that the approach to getting to the rigor must be different based on the different populations. There's no innate genius required to have a position in science and math. There's no, you're not born as a particular type of genius, and that's the reason why you're an engineer. No, it's just that you spend time with it. It's that you love it. It's that when you deal with it, when a problem arises, you sit with that problem long enough to be able to come up with solutions. You're creative and imaginative enough, and you have that stick-to-itiveness to be able to overcome those challenges. And that stick-to-itiveness, that creativity, that willingness to sit with a problem until you can solve it, that willingness to sit for 9, 10, 11, 12 hours with a problem until you solve it, comes with seeing yourself as part of that discipline. And so if we deal with the sort of socio-psychological dimensions of this work and convince young folks that science and math are what they can do, I'm not saying they're all going to be scientists and mathematicians. They certainly will feel like it's a part of who they are, and they're willing to put in the work to be successful academically. Now, whether or not it's their thing will happen over the course of the journey, right? A kid can love science, think they're a scientist, and then stumble into pottery and say, you know what? I just want to do pottery for the rest of my life. But I'm a scientifically and mathematically literate person who ends up being someone who's interested in pottery. And someone might like, oh my gosh, I'm into science and math. It's amazing. And guess what? I want to engage in nanotechnology. That's my decision. But I can engage in nanotechnology being a scientifically and mathematically literate person. So my work is about having an equal baseline of perception of self, of basic literacy in these subjects, of basic competency in these projects. And then as life unfolds, if it becomes your thing, you can leap into it and be successful. And if it does not be and even if it's not your profession, it can still be a thing. And you can attach that to what your passion is. I want a world where a kid is like, you know what? I'm a writer, but I'm a scientist. I want to be a science journalist. I'm a scientist, but I'm really into swimming. I'm going to find ways to fine tune my body and understand what I eat and train myself with scientific knowledge to be a better swimmer. It's about this baseline of equal scientific literacy and perception that it is a piece of your identity that we have to get to in this nation if we want to close the gaps between the science jobs and the science people.
That's Dr. Christopher Emdin. The book is titled STEM, STEAM, Make, Dream, Reimagining the Culture of Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math. There's a lot more to this conversation. If you want to hear more, head on over to CyberWire Pro and sign up for Interview Selects, where you get access to this and many more extended interviews. And now, a word from our sponsor, Invicti. Your organization is building and updating business-critical web applications faster than ever, and with so much pressure to move fast, you may find yourself making trade-offs between innovation and security. Now you can build fast without sacrificing security, thanks to Invicti. Invicti is the application security platform that helps your dev, sec, and ops teams work together to secure every website, web app, and API, even if you have thousands. With unparalleled accuracy and automation, Invicti scales like no other AppSec solution. And with more than 50 integrations, Invicti slides into your workflows more smoothly than any other platform. Now you can innovate as fast as you want without compromising on security. Discover why many of the world's largest organizations innovate securely with Invicti. Visit i.invicti.com/cyberwire. And we thank Invicti for sponsoring our show. The threat actor MuddyWaters, also known as Mercury or Static Kitten, was recently attributed to Iran's Ministry of Intelligence and Security by U.S. Cyber Command. Tomer Bar is Director of Security Research at SafeBreach, and I checked in with him for some insights on MuddyWaters.
So according to CISA, MuddyWaters is a subunit under the Iranian Ministry of Intelligence and Security. And this APT group has conducted broad cyber campaigns in support of this ministry objectives since approximately 2017. And they are focused on cyber espionage, but they also use to deploy ransomware as part of their activity.
And so what is the current state of MuddyWaters' activities? What are we seeing them doing these days?
Okay, so they are still active, very active. They never rest. And the targets are spread all over the globe. Mostly they are focused on the Middle East, but also we see targets from Asia to Africa, Europe, and North America as well. And they are targeting different sectors, the oil and natural gas sector, telecommunication, defense, local government, and other sectors. But this is the major sectors that they are targeting. And they are stealing victims' data. Also, there are some evidence that they share this stolen data with other malicious cyber threat actors. So it's very interesting.
And what sort of tools are they using to go about the things that they do? What are their techniques?
Okay, so they're using a lot of techniques, more than 20 different MITRE techniques all along the cyber kill chain. So for initial access, they usually use spear phishing. Sometimes they use spear phishing mails, including a zip file with an Excel that is includes a malicious macro. And once you are enable the macro, it will run and infect the computer. And the second major attack vector is spear phishing using a PDF file that seems legitimate, but it drops a malicious file to the victim's network. So this is the initial access. And after the initial access, they use a lot of proprietary tools. They have a large arsenal, and they're very sophisticated developers because they are developing malwares in almost all the possible programming languages. I can at least say that they are using 6 programming languages, different ones: C++, PowerShell, VBA, WSF script, Python, JScript, and much more. So each tool is different and unique. And once the security researchers community thinks that we are capturing the tool, the next day comes and pop up their next tool. Sometimes they infect the same machine with more than one tool. So if you want, I can detail some important facts on their main tools.
So when you're dealing with a threat actor like MuddyWater, who has such a spectrum of tools at their disposal that they're using, what are your recommendations for organizations to protect themselves?
It's a very good question. But before that, I will also mention that MuddyWater not only using their own self-developed tool, they are using a lot of public malwares and hack tools like Mimikatz, Lasagna, and other credential dumpers. And also they are commonly use post-exploitation framework, public one like Empire, Powerplate, Kodiak, and Rats. And they are also using GitHub and Pastebin for C2 server. So when customer, organization, enterprises design their security architecture, they should take to their attention that they need to are required to deal with self-developed tool and also public tools and communication to legit sites like Telegram, like GitHub or like Pastebin. So it's more difficult than other commodity tools. So, but there are few recommendations that the CISA and we think that will keep you safe. So the first recommendation is to deploy application control software and limit which executable code can run by users. And extra attention should be paid to the email attachment and file download via links in emails, which usually contains executable code. So these are more suspicious and should be taken care with caution. Another recommendation is using multi-factor authentication because, as I said, MuddyWater harvesting your credential. So if you will use multi-factor authentication, usually with temp code or another mean of security like a cellular phone, then you will be most protected. So multi-factor authentication on webmail, VPNs, and any account which is the access is critical for the organization. Also limit the use of administrator privileges. This is always good, not just for MuddyWater. It will limit the damage that the threat actor can do when they succeed in achieving the initial access. Of course, enable antivirus and anti-malware software. Of course, updating the signature definition in a timely manner, because an antivirus which is not updated, it's like if you have no antivirus at all. Sometimes you can consider adding an email banner to emails received from outside of the organization and disabling hyperlinks in those mails because this is not the majority of the emails and they are more suspicious. And last but not least, train your user. It's not just about technology and security controls. Sometimes the weakest point of cybersecurity are the user, which need just one mistake, and you are welcoming the Iranian APT into your environment. So do training awareness, simulations, and recognizing the importance of phishing report and social engineering attempts between the employees, and adapt threat reputation service, and finally install updates and patches to the operating system, software and firmware, because MuddyWaters is using plenty of exploit against Exchange and against Microsoft Office, and also against the domain controller in order to achieve domain admin privileges and getting the entire network under their control.
That's Tomer Bar from SafeBreach. Thanks to all of our sponsors for making the CyberWire possible, especially our supporting sponsor, PlexTrack. PlexTrack, making cybersecurity teams more efficient, effective, and proactive. Learn more at plextrack.com/thecyberwire. And that's the CyberWire. For links to all of today's stories, check out our daily briefing at thecyberwire.com. Don't miss this weekend's Research Saturday and my conversation with John Hammond from Huntress. We're discussing targeted APT activity. Baby Shark is out for blood. That's Research Saturday. Check it out. The CyberWire podcast is proudly produced in Maryland out of the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technologies. Our amazing CyberWire team is Liz Irvin, Elliot Peltzman, Trey Hester, Brandon Karpf, Eliana White, Peru Prakash, Justin Sabi, Tim Nodar, Joe Kerrigan, Carol Terrio, Ben Yellen, Nick Valecki, Gina Johnson, Bennett Moe, Chris Russell, John Petrick, Jennifer Iben, Rick Howard, Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here next week. For the past 6 years, the CyberWire has delivered your daily dose of the top cybersecurity news, and we're proud to be a trusted source in the industry. To celebrate our Big 6, and as a special thanks to all of our CyberWire listeners and readers, for this week only, we'll be offering a discount of 60% off annual subscriptions of CyberWire Pro. Use code CyberWireAnniversary2022 by April 25th to take advantage of this celebratory discount. Subscribe and save now, but above all, thank you for listening to the CyberWire network of shows.